I never imagined my life would spiral into chaos because of a jealous ex and a twisted scheme to ruin my reputation. Yet here I am, sharing every detail of a saga that left me scarred, but also strangely liberated. I always prided myself on my honesty and loyalty, but nothing could have prepared me for the betrayal that would unravel all I once thought was true. What started as a simple breakup quickly turned into a meticulously orchestrated trap. A trap that involved false accusations, manipulation, and even an attempted baby trap. And while most people might have forgiven, I refused to. I couldn't let her rewrite my story with lies and deceit, so I set out to expose the truth and exact a revenge that was as calculated as it was satisfying. My story began almost a year ago when I and Marissa, as I'll call her, ended our relationship. On the surface, it seemed like an amicable parting. We had our disagreements, sure, but nothing too dramatic. I even believed that we had both moved on. However, as the weeks turned into months, things took a dark turn. Marissa, whose jealousy and need for control I had underestimated, started insinuating to mutual friends, and eventually to my family, that I had been unfaithful. At first, I brushed off the rumors as the usual bitterness of a breakup. Yet, soon enough, I began to notice that the whispers were growing louder, more insistent. It all came crashing down one humid Thursday afternoon when I received a call from my sister. Her voice trembled as she recounted how a distant cousin had confronted her with shocking news. Marissa was pregnant. My immediate thought was that it might have been mine, a mistake, a misstep in our turbulent relationship that I couldn't remember ever committing. My mind raced back to the last time we were together, trying to recall any misstep, any stray moment that could have been misinterpreted. Nothing fit. The more I considered it, the more I realized that there was a discrepancy. I was not the man responsible for this pregnancy, and yet Marissa was building an elaborate narrative where I was the guilty party. I spent sleepless nights trying to piece together any evidence that could exonerate me. Every memory was scrutinized until it felt like I was tearing myself apart. The gnawing suspicion that I had been set up by someone I once loved slowly turned into a burning determination to uncover the truth. I started by going over every conversation we had, every argument, every unspoken nuance. The answer was hidden in plain sight. The details of Marissa's behavior, the frequent unexplained absences, and the furtive phone calls. There was a pattern emerging, one that pointed away from me and toward someone else. But to expose her, I needed evidence, concrete proof that Marissa was not only lying about my infidelity, but also living a double life. My first breakthrough came when I discreetly contacted a mutual friend who had remained in touch with her. Over coffee, in a quiet, out-of-the-way diner, I pressed for details about her recent behavior. Hesitantly, my friend admitted that Marissa had been spending unusually long hours with a coworker, someone she described as too charming for his own good. This tidbit, seemingly trivial, was the spark I needed. I began gathering scraps of conversation and social media posts that hinted at secret meetings, clandestine rendezvous, and a life that did not include me. The more I uncovered, the more it became clear. Marissa had been deceiving everyone, accusing me of infidelity to deflect attention from her own indiscretions. Armed with this information, I hired a private investigator. I wasn't a man to stoop to the level of paranoia, but I needed undeniable proof. Over several weeks, the investigator compiled records of Marissa's movements, phone records, and even photos that captured moments of intimacy with her coworker. Each piece of evidence reinforced the narrative that she had been unfaithful long before the pregnancy was announced. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. Not only was I being falsely accused, but I was also being used as a scapegoat to cover up her betrayal. Once the evidence was laid out, I had two choices. I could either confront her directly or let the truth unravel naturally. Confronting her would give her the chance to twist the narrative further, to play the victim once more. Instead, I decided to use her deceit against her. I meticulously collected every document, every photograph, every message, and stored them securely. The plan was simple. I would expose her, but on my own terms, ensuring that every lie she had spun would come crashing down around her. I knew that trust, once shattered, could never be restored. Instead of seeking reconciliation or closure, I channeled all my energy into planning a public reckoning that would force Marissa to face the consequences of her actions. I reached out to a respected local journalist known for his integrity and penchant for investigative reporting. Over a discreet meeting at a quiet bar in the outskirts of town, I presented him with the damning evidence. I spoke calmly and methodically about the inconsistencies in Marissa's story, the hidden texts, and the photographs that painted an entirely different picture from the one she had crafted. The journalist was intrigued. He had heard whispers of a scandal involving a well-known local figure and a series of false accusations, but nothing concrete. He assured me that he would look into the matter further. It was a nerve-wracking wait as I wondered if justice would be served or if Marissa would manage to pull another fast one. Days later, a feature article hit the front page of the local paper, titled "The Lies That Bind: A Scandal in Our Midst." It detailed how Marissa had manipulated those closest to her, exploiting her position to trap an innocent man in a web of deceit. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for her. Friends, family, and even her coworkers distanced themselves once they learned the truth. I wasn't looking for sympathy or vindication from the public. I simply wanted the truth out. As the scandal escalated, Marissa's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. Investigations were launched, and soon, the evidence I had gathered became a central piece in legal proceedings. There was no forgiveness for her betrayal in my eyes, only a cold, hard sense of justice. Yet the true measure of revenge lay not in public humiliation or legal repercussions, but in the quiet moments when the dust finally settled. I remember sitting alone one evening in my apartment, a cup of coffee in hand, contemplating the irony of it all. Marissa had tried to paint me as a cheater, a liar, a man incapable of fidelity. But the very act of accusing me had exposed her own weaknesses, her own inability to face the truth. I had been betrayed, yes, but I had also been liberated. The pain of the accusation had transformed into a determination that I would never allow anyone to tarnish my name again. I won't lie, there was a part of me that wanted to revel in her downfall. Every new detail that emerged about her deceit, every public statement from people who had once admired her, only fueled my sense of justice. I saw her downfall not as an act of cruelty, but as the natural consequence of her actions. She had crafted a life built on lies, and now that life was in ruins, I didn't feel glee in her suffering. I felt a cold satisfaction, a validation that the truth always prevails. Looking back, I realized that this experience taught me more about human nature than any other chapter of my life. Trust is a fragile thing, easily shattered by envy and deceit. And while I suffered for a time under the weight of false accusations, I emerged stronger and wiser. I learned to scrutinize not only the actions of others, but also to trust my instincts. When something feels off, it usually is, and ignoring that feeling can cost you dearly. I also learned that revenge doesn't have to be explosive or overtly dramatic. Sometimes, the sweetest form of retribution is the quiet dismantling of a false narrative, the steady, methodical collection of truth until the lies can no longer be sustained. It wasn't about winning a petty battle or scoring a personal vendetta. It was about reclaiming my life and proving that integrity still has a place in a world so willing to compromise it for scandal and gossip. I must emphasize, however, that my story isn't meant to be a cautionary tale for every relationship. Not every breakup turns into a media frenzy, and not every betrayal warrants a public spectacle. In my case, the stakes were higher because my reputation, my very identity, was under attack. And when the person responsible for that attack is someone you once trusted implicitly, the need for retribution becomes a matter of principle. I refused to let her rewrite my story in her favor. I refused to forgive, not because I was bitter, but because forgiving would mean accepting that her actions were somehow justified. There was no room for compromise when your character is on the line. Even now, as I recount the events with a sense of clarity and purpose, I can't help but feel a lingering resolve. I have moved on, built a new life, and learned to guard my heart more fiercely. The scars of betrayal remain, a permanent reminder of a time when I was almost consumed by lies. But every scar tells a story of survival, of courage, and ultimately, a victory over those who seek to bring you down. For anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, take heart in knowing that the truth has a way of revealing itself. The road to vindication might be long and fraught with uncertainty, but perseverance and a commitment to honesty can turn even the darkest of betrayals into a testament of strength. I've learned that revenge, when executed with precision and integrity, isn't about stooping to the level of your betrayer. It's about reclaiming your narrative, showing the world that you are more than the false accusations and the manipulations of a jealous mind. There is an undeniable satisfaction in watching a well-orchestrated plan unfold. As the pieces fell into place, every conversation with the journalist, every piece of evidence meticulously stored away, served as a reminder that the truth was on my side. Marissa's downfall wasn't a spontaneous act of retribution. It was the inevitable result of a carefully constructed truth that I refused to let be buried by lies. And while some might argue that revenge is a dangerous game, in my case, it was the only way to restore the balance and ensure that no one else would be ensnared by her deceit. In the end, justice isn't a grand, dramatic event filled with explosions and cliffhangers. It's a quiet, relentless force that over time erodes the false narratives and leaves only the undeniable truth in its wake. I stand here, scarred yet unbroken, as living proof that even in a world where betrayal lurks in every corner, truth and integrity can prevail. I carry the lessons of this experience with me every day, and though I have no desire to relive the pain of those dark times, I know that every step I took on that treacherous path was a step toward reclaiming my life. So, to anyone who's ever been falsely accused, manipulated, or betrayed by someone they once cared about, hold on to the truth, trust your instincts, and know that the greatest revenge is not forgiveness. It's the unyielding commitment to living your life on your own terms. Marissa's legacy is one of lies and deceit, and while I will never forget the betrayal, I choose to remember it as the catalyst that propelled me into a future where integrity reigns supreme. Now, as I sit back and reflect on all that has happened, I realize that my story is not just about exposing a web of lies. It is also about the resilience of the human spirit and the relentless pursuit of truth. I have learned that the pain of betrayal, as deep as it might cut, can eventually transform into a powerful force for change, a force that pushes you to stand up, speak out, and ensure that those who attempt to destroy your life with falsehoods are met with the unvarnished light of truth. There is no room in my life for forgiveness when the price of trusting the wrong person is as high as it was in my case. I will not allow Marissa's actions to define me or dictate the course of my future. Instead, I use them as a constant reminder of the strength that lies within me. And if my story can serve as a beacon for others who find themselves ensnared in a similar web of deceit, then sharing it is worth every painful recollection. I have learned to embrace the scars that remain as symbols of my survival. They remind me that even when you are betrayed by the very people you once held dear, you have the power to rise above and rewrite your own narrative. In the end, truth is not just a weapon. It's a shield that protects your identity, your honor, and your future from the corrosive effects of false accusations. And as long as I stand by the principles of honesty and integrity, no one can ever take that away from me. This experience, as bitter and challenging as it was, ultimately reaffirmed a simple truth. The only person you truly owe loyalty to is yourself. And so, I continue forward, unburdened by the lies of the past, resolute in my commitment to live a life defined by truth and self-respect. I have no regrets, only lessons learned and a renewed determination to never allow another person's jealousy or deceit to undermine who I am. The journey was long, filled with moments of doubt, anger, and heartache. Yet, through it all, I never wavered in my quest for justice. I exposed the truth not with theatrics, but with the slow, inexorable momentum of facts that could not be ignored. Marissa tried to trap me in a narrative of infidelity and betrayal, but in the end, it was her own actions that sealed her fate. I found solace in the knowledge that the truth was my ally, and that, despite the devastation she caused, I had emerged from the ordeal stronger and more determined than ever. So here I am, sharing my story not to seek pity or applause, but to remind everyone that even in the face of deep betrayal, the truth will eventually set you free. And if you ever find yourself ensnared in a web of lies, remember, the most satisfying revenge is not forgiveness. It's the undeniable, unyielding proclamation of your own truth. I refuse to let anyone tarnish my name or manipulate my life again. The scars may remain, but they are badges of honor, proof that I survived the darkness and emerged into the light. In the end, my story is a testament to the power of persistence, the importance of self-respect, and the triumph of truth over deceit. I hope that by sharing every detail of this harrowing experience, others who have been wronged will find the courage to fight back, to stand up for themselves, and to never allow the lies of the past to dictate their future. For me, the journey toward vindication wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, restoring my dignity, and proving that even in the most treacherous circumstances, justice will find a way. Every morning as I wake, I am reminded of the choices I made in the face of betrayal. I chose not to forgive, not because I harbor bitterness, but because I understand that forgiveness in such a situation only emboldens the deceiver. Instead, I channel that energy into building a future defined by integrity, where every step I take is a reaffirmation of my commitment to truth. And while the memory of Marissa's deception still lingers, it no longer haunts me, it empowers me. I am free from the confines of her lies, and with each new day, I grow stronger, more vigilant, and more determined to protect what is rightfully mine. This isn't a tale of romantic sorrow or melodramatic redemption. It's the raw, unfiltered account of how one person's web of lies was meticulously dismantled by the steadfast resolve of another. I share it as a reminder: never let anyone else control your narrative. Stand firm, seek the truth, and if necessary, unleash a storm of retribution that leaves no room for deceit to thrive. I did, and I will continue to do so every day, in every moment. And so, with the final pieces of my shattered past now gathered and arranged to form an unassailable picture of truth, I move forward unburdened by regret. My name, my honor, and my future are mine alone, reclaimed from the clutches of jealousy and deception. This is my story, a story of betrayal, determination, and the unwavering resolve to let the truth reign supreme. I share it not out of malice, but as a beacon of hope for anyone who has been wronged. Remember, truth is a force that, when wielded with unwavering conviction, will always prevail. There is no greater satisfaction than knowing that justice has been served. I look back on those turbulent times with a mixture of sorrow and pride. Sorrow for the pain inflicted by someone I once trusted, and pride for the relentless pursuit of truth that ultimately set me free. No amount of manipulation or falsehoods can undo the fact that I reclaimed my narrative and emerged victorious. I chose not to forgive because forgiveness would have meant accepting a lie. And that is something I simply cannot do. Every moment of that painful chapter taught me that the most powerful revenge is not found in petty acts of spite, but in the resolute, unyielding commitment to live a life defined by truth. I will never forget the lessons learned, nor will I ever allow anyone to diminish my worth with unfounded accusations. The path was long and arduous, but every step taken was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. And as I continue to build my life on the foundation of integrity, I carry with me the conviction that no amount of deceit can ever tarnish the truth. In sharing my journey, I hope you see that even in the darkest moments, there is a spark of hope. A spark that can ignite the fire of retribution and lead you to a future where your truth stands unchallenged. I will forever remain unapologetic for the choices I made, for they were the choices that ultimately restored my honor. And while the pain of betrayal will always be a part of me, it is also a reminder of the strength I discovered in the process of overcoming it. This is not just a story of revenge, but a celebration of resilience, the triumph of truth, and the unwavering determination to never allow a lie to define your worth. It is a declaration that no matter how far you may fall, the truth will always have a way of rising to the surface, and when it does, it will shine brighter than any deceit ever could. I stand here today, unbowed and resolute, as living proof that the pursuit of truth is the most potent weapon against betrayal. And if you ever find yourself betrayed by someone you once trusted, remember, the truth is your ally, and your resolve is your shield. In the end, justice is not about forgiveness. It's about reclaiming your life and ensuring that the lies that once threatened to define you are replaced with the unassailable light of truth. This is my journey. This is my revenge. And I will never let anyone dictate the narrative of my life again. I never thought that a gift from my grandparents could set off a chain of events so twisted and vindictive that it would leave scars I'd never forget. Yet here I am, pouring out the raw truth about the day everything unraveled, a day that turned betrayal into revenge and shattered the facade of family perfection. It all started when my grandparents, the kind of people who believed in magic and second chances, surprised me with a trip to Rome. They had always been the ones to quietly cheer me on, the ones who understood my dreams even when the rest of the family didn't. I'd spent years yearning for an adventure, a taste of something more than the mundane existence I was forced to live by. And then, in a single moment of generosity, they handed me what I'd always wanted, a ticket to Rome. I remember the embossed envelope, the creamy paper that promised sunlit piazzas, ancient ruins, and gelato that tasted like heaven. In that moment, I was on top of the world. But as life often does, it threw a wrench into my perfect plans. My parents, ever the enforcers of their own twisted version of fairness, decided that I was not the only one who deserved a break from the relentless monotony of our suburban existence. They had a plan, one that had been in the making for as long as I could remember, to ensure that my golden child sister, Jade, would always receive preferential treatment. In their eyes, Jade was the one who could do no wrong. She was blessed, untouchable, the family's shining star. And so, with no regard for my dreams or my excitement, they forced me to give up the ticket to her. It was as if my voice, my desires, had suddenly become invisible. I watched, numb with disbelief, as they passed me over in favor of someone who'd never had to fight for a moment's happiness. I was furious, of course. I tried to protest, tried to reason with them, explaining that this trip was more than a vacation. It was a piece of my soul they were snatching away. But my words fell on deaf ears. My parents' conviction was unyielding, and Jade's laughter at my expense sealed my fate. I remember the humiliation, the overwhelming sense of betrayal that clutched at my heart. The life I'd imagined in Rome was abruptly stolen from me, replaced by a bitter resignation that simmered beneath the surface. Jade, ever the unknowing beneficiary of my family's favoritism, was ecstatic when she received the ticket. She danced around the living room with a joy that felt like salt on my wounds. I couldn't stand to see her so happy, especially knowing how easily everything that had been mine was now hers. Yet, I was forced into silence, expected to swallow my anger like bitter medicine. But inside, a storm was gathering, a relentless desire for revenge, not on Jade, but on the puppeteers who had robbed me of my destiny. Fate, it seems, had its own plans. On the day of her departure, just as she was about to leave for the airport, Jade's cab, her chariot of privilege, met with a catastrophic accident. I'll never forget the call. A frantic voice on the phone, her words choked with shock. "The cab, it crashed. I'm fine, but the ticket..." In that instant, something in me shifted. Here was my golden child, crashing not only her vehicle, but also the carefully constructed myth of her untouchability. As the details trickled in, it became clear that this wasn't just a stroke of bad luck. It was the universe's way of balancing the scales. I didn't rush to her side. I didn't offer the expected condolences. Instead, I watched from a distance, calculating, observing the fallout. My parents, in their overblown concern for the family reputation, scrambled to make excuses and to salvage what remained of their perfect image. And Jade, ever the fragile masterpiece of parental adoration, played the victim with the grace of a trained actress. But the moment had come when I decided that I would no longer be a pawn in their twisted game. I spent the next few days meticulously planning my next move. I wasn't content to simply reclaim the ticket and leave. I needed to show them that betrayal had consequences. I began with subtle acts of defiance, the kind that would sow seeds of doubt in the minds of those who had once thought they controlled every facet of my life. I returned every borrowed item, every favor I had ever done for them, with a cold, calculated finality. Every smile they had forced upon me was replaced with a tight-lipped silence. I was the quiet storm, biding my time until the perfect moment arrived. When the day came for my own journey, I made sure it was unforgettable. I took back the ticket, my grandparents' genuine gift, a symbol of hope, and booked my own flight to Rome. There was a rush in that act, a heady mix of liberation and righteous anger. I felt empowered, as if reclaiming my own narrative was the first step in dismantling the web of manipulation that had choked me for years. As I boarded the plane, I looked back one last time at the life I was leaving behind, a life of unacknowledged potential, a life where my voice had always been secondary. Rome was everything I had dreamed of, and more. The city pulsed with history, art, and a vibrancy that rekindled my own inner fire. I spent my days wandering cobblestone streets, marveling at ruins that whispered secrets of ancient triumphs and defeats. Every step I took in that city was a defiant act of reclaiming my lost time. I reveled in the freedom of being unburdened by the expectations of a family that had always sought to control me. In Rome, I wasn't the forgotten child. I was a conqueror, carving my own destiny. Yet, even in this newfound bliss, the memory of betrayal gnawed at me. My parents' smug expressions, their unrepentant arrogance, haunted my every moment. I knew that I had to confront them, to let them know that I would never again be their sacrificial lamb. And so, as the days passed and the beauty of Rome filled my soul, I began to plot my revenge with a clarity that was as exhilarating as it was chilling. My plan was not one of physical harm, but of intellectual and emotional dismantling, a reckoning that would force them to confront the consequences of their actions. I started by gathering every scrap of evidence that showcased the injustice I had suffered. I collected old emails, text messages, even voicemails where they had dismissed my dreams, where they had belittled my aspirations. I compiled every moment when they had favored Jade over me, every instance when my voice had been silenced by their overbearing authority. This wasn't just about reclaiming a trip, it was about reclaiming my identity and showing them that their neglect and manipulation had consequences. I posted my story on a little-known subreddit dedicated to tales of family betrayal and personal triumph. I was meticulous in my account, laying out every detail with a raw honesty that shocked even me. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Strangers, many of whom had experienced similar betrayals, flooded the thread with support and admiration. They called me brave, resilient, and inspiring. Some even offered legal advice, urging me to consider a class action suit for emotional distress. I didn't need their help to know that I was already winning. I was no longer the silenced child of a tyrannical household. I was a voice that would not be stifled. I kept the thread alive for weeks, updating it with every new revelation. I detailed the moment I reclaimed my ticket, the thrill of leaving behind a life of mediocrity for the splendor of Rome, and every step of my meticulously planned revenge. I left no stone unturned in exposing the hypocrisy of my parents, their inability to recognize the worth of their own flesh and blood, and their blind adoration of a child who had never truly earned it. Each post was a declaration of war, a war against the oppressive forces that had dictated my life for far too long. The most satisfying moment came when my parents finally acknowledged the thread. I remember the email notification as if it were yesterday, a brief, terse message from my mother, half apologetic and half condescending. They claimed ignorance of the full extent of my suffering, saying that they had only wanted the best for me by giving Jade the trip. Their words were a hollow echo of the countless times they had dismissed my feelings. I replied with a single, devastating truth. The best for me would have been to be heard, not to be sacrificed for someone else's shine. There was no room for forgiveness in that reply. It was a declaration of independence, a final severance of the bonds that had once shackled me. I didn't stop at words. I arranged a discreet meeting with a respected family therapist who specialized in cases of emotional neglect. I knew that if I could get an unbiased expert to validate my experience, the scales would finally tip in my favor. The therapist's report was damning. It detailed the systematic manipulation, the years of emotional abuse, and the deep-seated favoritism that had poisoned our family dynamic. I forwarded that report to my parents in a cold, detached email. I left it open-ended, letting them stew in the realization that their actions were not just morally reprehensible, but clinically harmful. The email was not a request for reconciliation. It was a final, vindictive reminder of everything they had lost by underestimating me. I took every opportunity to thrive in Rome. Each new discovery, a hidden trattoria, a secluded piazza, a breathtaking sunset over the Tiber, was a small victory against the past. I documented it all on my blog, titling each entry with a nod to my newfound freedom and a subtle jab at the family that had once confined me. My words flowed with a confidence that had been buried for years, resonating with readers who saw in me the possibility of liberation from toxic familial bonds. I realized that my journey was not just physical, but spiritual, a pilgrimage away from a life of servitude towards one of unapologetic self-empowerment. Every night, as I lay in a modest Roman apartment that smelled faintly of history and possibility, I replayed the events in my mind. I could still see the smug smiles of my parents, hear their dismissive tones, and feel the weight of their expectations. But now, I was free of that burden. I had taken back what was rightfully mine, not just the ticket to Rome, but my own destiny. I had crafted a revenge that was both elegant and thorough, a slow dismantling of the lies and betrayals that had defined my past. In the weeks that followed, I began to see the true cost of their actions. My parents, now stripped of the facade of perfection, were forced to confront the reality of their own shortcomings. Friends and relatives, once blinded by the family's outward charm, started to question the narrative they had been fed for years. The ripple effects were profound. Conversations at family gatherings took on a different tone. Questions were asked that had long been suppressed. I watched as the once impenetrable wall of deceit began to crumble, and I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that the truth, like the eternal city of Rome itself, could not be buried forever. I didn't seek to destroy them physically or ruin their lives completely. That was never my intention. My revenge was in the reclaiming of my voice, in exposing the hypocrisy and cruelty that had defined our family for so long. I wanted them to feel the sting of their own betrayal, to understand that a child's spirit, once broken, could rise again, not as a victim, but as a force of nature. I became a beacon for others who had suffered in silence, a living testament that even in the face of overwhelming betrayal, one could reclaim their own destiny. Now, as I write this from a small cafe near the Spanish Steps, I can't help but reflect on the journey that has brought me here. The trip to Rome was never just about sightseeing or the allure of ancient history. It was about rebirth. It was about proving to myself and to everyone who had ever doubted me that I was not defined by my past, by the cruelty of those who claimed to love me. I was defined by my resilience, my courage, and my unwavering determination to seek the truth, no matter how bitter it might be. I still hear the echoes of my parents' dismissive voices, the whispered justifications for their actions, even in my quiet moments. But those echoes have lost their power over me. I have replaced them with the vibrant sounds of Rome, the clatter of espresso cups, the chatter of locals, the timeless murmur of history unfolding around me. Each sound is a reminder that life, in all its messy brilliance, continues to move forward, regardless of the shadows cast by betrayal. I never did receive an apology from my parents. In fact, as time went on, they retreated further into their own justifications and delusions. Jade, ever the unwitting instrument of their schemes, became a mirror reflecting back to them their own failings, a constant reminder that the golden child was not immune to the consequences of her actions. And so, with every step I took along the ancient streets, I felt a fierce joy in knowing that I had won. I had reclaimed my life, my dreams, and my dignity. I had taken revenge not by inflicting pain for its own sake, but by rising above the toxicity that had once threatened to consume me. This isn't a tale of simple retribution or petty squabbles. It's a chronicle of personal resurrection. I stand here as proof that even when those we love betray us, even when we are forced to sacrifice our own happiness for the sake of someone else's image, there is a path to reclaiming everything that was lost. Rome, with all its ancient splendor, became the backdrop for my transformation. It reminded me that history is written by those who dare to defy their fate and forge their own destiny. Looking back, I can see that my grandparents' gift was not just a trip, it was a lifeline. It was a reminder that somewhere out there, there was a place where I could be free, where I could be heard, and where I could finally be myself. I carry that gift with me every day, not as a token of lost time, but as a symbol of victory over the forces that sought to keep me in the shadows. My revenge, as calculated and precise as it was, wasn't about inflicting irreparable harm on those who had wronged me. It was about reclaiming the power they had stolen and proving, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that I was more than their expendable pawn. I did not forgive, nor would I ever, because forgiveness in this case would have meant relinquishing the strength that I had painstakingly built. Instead, I chose to let my actions speak louder than any apology ever could. Now, every time I see a photograph of the Colosseum or hear the distant echo of a church bell in Rome, I'm reminded of the incredible journey I undertook, not just across continents, but deep within my own soul. I remember the anger, the betrayal, and the painstaking steps I took to rebuild my life. I recall the moments of despair and the eventual triumph that came with understanding that my worth was never defined by my family's shallow expectations. To anyone reading this who has ever felt betrayed, who has ever been forced into silence by those who claim to love them, I say this: your story matters. Your pain is valid, and your fight for dignity is worth every ounce of your strength. I was once that silent child, forced to watch my dreams slip away while others basked in undeserved glory. But I learned that the most potent revenge is living a life that shines so brilliantly that it renders the voices of your oppressors nothing more than echoes in the distance. As I prepare to leave Rome, to return to a life that I now control completely, I leave behind a legacy of defiance. I leave behind the evidence of my struggle, the raw truth of my rebellion, and the undeniable proof that I am not defined by the cruelty of others. I am defined by my own will, by the journey that transformed betrayal into a fierce, unyielding determination to rise. So here I am at the crossroads of past and future, free from the chains of expectation and ready to forge a new path. A path illuminated by the light of truth, courage, and unapologetic self-respect. The echoes of my grandparents' gift, the sweet promise of Rome, continue to guide me. And in that guidance, I find solace, not in the forgiveness of those who betrayed me, but in the unwavering realization that my spirit, once suppressed, now soars higher than ever before. This is my story, a tale of stolen dreams, of unyielding rebellion, and of a revenge that was not about destruction, but about reclaiming every shattered piece of my soul. It's a story of transformation, a journey from despair to triumph, and a reminder that sometimes the greatest victory is simply to live life on your own terms. I will carry the lessons of Rome with me always, a constant reminder that no matter how deeply betrayal cuts, one can always rise, rebuild, and thrive. I have taken back my destiny, and in doing so, I have rewritten the narrative of my life. My past will remain a testament to the darkness I endured, but it will never eclipse the brilliance of the future I now embrace. I never imagined that a gift meant to brighten my life could become the catalyst for my liberation. Yet, as I sit here and reflect on every twist and turn, I can't help but smile at the irony of it all. The trip to Rome was stolen from me, only to be reclaimed with a ferocity that left no room for regret or forgiveness. I stand as a living reminder that sometimes the harshest betrayals yield the most resounding victories, a truth that resonates not just in the echoes of history, but in the beating heart of every soul that has ever dared to defy its fate. And so, my journey continues, no longer as the forgotten child, but as the master of my own destiny, forever marked by the city that taught me how to rise from the ashes of betrayal and soar with the wings of unyielding revenge. There are no more apologies, no more regrets, only the fierce, unyielding certainty that I will never allow anyone to steal my future again. This is my final stand against a lifetime of being overlooked, my final act of rebellion against a family that prized appearances over authenticity. With every step I take forward, I honor the gift that set me free. A trip to Rome that became the turning point in my life, the moment I reclaimed my voice and wrote my own story. I am no longer a bystander in my own life. I am the author, the hero, and yes, the avenger of every slight and betrayal that was inflicted upon me. And as I look toward the horizon, I know that every word I've written here, every truth I've shared, is a testament to the power of resilience and the unbreakable spirit that defines me. My story isn't over. It's just the beginning. A beginning forged in the fires of betrayal and tempered by the cool, steady resolve of a soul that refused to be diminished. To those who would dare to cross me, let my life be a warning. I will always rise, and I will always reclaim what is mine. And that, in itself, is the sweetest revenge. I share this story not to dwell in the bitterness of the past, but to illuminate the path that led me to liberation. A path that, once trodden, leaves no room for forgiveness for those who betray. It leaves only the cold, unyielding satisfaction of knowing that I am finally free. So as I take one last look at the city that once whispered promises of hope and rebirth, I step forward into a future defined solely by my own choices. A future where betrayal is met not with forgiveness, but with a resolute determination to claim one's rightful place in the world. And in that place, there is no room for those who would steal your dreams. I am free, I am victorious, and I will never, ever be silenced again. Every single moment of this journey, every twist of fate that brought me to this point is etched into my memory. It serves as a permanent reminder that sometimes the greatest adventure begins with the courage to say, no more. In that simple declaration, I found the strength to rewrite my destiny and, ultimately, to triumph over the forces that once held me captive. And now, as I set forth on the next chapter of my life, I carry with me not just the memories of a magnificent city, but the scars of a past that forged me into the person I am today. A person who knows that revenge is not about destruction, but about reclaiming one's true self. A person who will never allow the ghosts of betrayal to define the future. This is not just a story of revenge, but of rebirth. A reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is a spark waiting to ignite the flames of a new beginning. And I, at last, am that spark. I leave you with this truth. The journey to freedom is paved with courage, determination, and the unyielding refusal to accept a life that is not your own. Let every betrayal be the fuel that propels you forward, every injustice a call to rise above, and every moment of despair a reminder of the strength that lies within. For in the end, it is not the past that defines us, but the choices we make in the face of it. And I choose to live as my own master, unforgiving, unyielding, and unequivocally free. I still remember the moment I realized my wedding day was about to become a living nightmare. I had spent months dreaming of a perfect day, an elegant celebration of love, with friends and family gathered around me. Everything was planned to perfection, from the soft pastel decorations to the exquisite menu. I was radiant in my wedding gown, and my heart was full as I stepped into the reception hall. That is, until the night took a dark turn that I could have never foreseen. I had always known that my mother-in-law had a cold, calculating streak beneath her polished exterior, but I had also hoped that, on my wedding day, any lingering resentment or jealousy would be swept away by the sheer happiness that love brings. My husband, the man I thought I knew so well, had chosen me over his mother, and that decision was something his mother had never fully accepted. Throughout the months leading up to the wedding, I picked up on subtle hints of disapproval, a curt remark here, a half-hidden smirk there, but I always convinced myself that it was merely her way of being concerned for him. I never imagined that her disdain would manifest in something so vile. After the ceremony, I eagerly anticipated the reception. I was ready to laugh, dance, and celebrate with everyone who had supported our union. A few moments into the festivities, I accepted a drink from what I assumed was a well-intentioned server. The cocktail was delicious, its flavor both refreshing and indulgent. As I mingled with guests, a strange heaviness began to cloud my thoughts. I felt dizzy and my vision blurred. The room, once filled with the joyful chatter of loved ones, began to spin. I reached out for something to steady myself, but my limbs betrayed me. Within seconds, I blacked out. I woke up later, sprawled on a plush sofa in the reception hall, my head pounding and my body trembling as if it had been through a war. The room was in disarray. The music was off, and my husband's friends whispered in hushed tones as they tried to make sense of what had happened. I could see concerned faces and hear murmurs of shock and disappointment. For a few moments, I was lost in a haze of confusion and pain, physical and emotional. It was then that I pieced together the horrifying possibility. Someone had tampered with my drink. As I struggled to regain my composure, a flood of emotions overwhelmed me: fear, anger, and betrayal. I remembered a recent heated conversation with my mother-in-law, whose tone was as icy as the champagne that had flowed earlier. The whispers of suspicion grew louder as fragments of recollections from earlier in the evening surfaced in my memory. I recalled her lingering near the bar, her eyes fixed on me with a look that suggested she was savoring my misery. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. She had spiked my drink, and in doing so, she had ruined one of the most important days of my life. The aftermath was a chaotic mess. Guests tried to piece together the timeline of events, and my husband, ever the mediator, attempted to smooth over the situation as best as he could. But his efforts did nothing to erase the humiliation and betrayal that I felt deep in my bones. I felt exposed and vulnerable, betrayed not only by my mother-in-law, but also by the man who had chosen her side over me. In that moment, I knew that forgiving her was out of the question. I was not the type to let someone get away with such a malicious act, especially on what was supposed to be a celebration of love. As the reception limped on, I retreated to a quiet corner of the hall, steeling myself against the sympathetic glances and awkward silences of guests. I couldn't help but overhear hushed conversations among family members, many of whom were torn between loyalty to my husband's side of the family and their own sense of right and wrong. Every whispered word felt like another betrayal, confirming my worst fears. My life had just been turned upside down by someone I had never truly trusted. The next day, amidst the wreckage of shattered dreams and broken promises, I received a phone call from my mother-in-law. Her tone was feigned calmness as she offered me a check for $5,000, a sum meant to compensate for the embarrassment and trouble I had been forced to endure. According to her, my husband had made his choice, and now it was up to me to decide if I wanted to accept her money and move on. I listened to her words in a state of numb disbelief, my mind reeling with anger. The idea that she could reduce her betrayal to a simple transaction was infuriating. I refused to be placated by money, and I refused to forgive a woman who had deliberately sabotaged my special day. That call marked the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter in which I vowed to reclaim my power and exact a measured, calculated revenge. Over the next few weeks, as I grappled with the fallout of the wedding disaster, I began to dig deeper into the circumstances surrounding that fateful evening. I discreetly reached out to a few trusted friends who had been present at the reception. Their accounts, combined with subtle hints I'd picked up before the incident, painted a clear picture of betrayal. It was evident that my mother-in-law had long harbored resentment towards me, and her actions were a premeditated attempt to humiliate me in front of everyone I loved. One evening, I sat alone in my quiet apartment, the silence punctuated only by the ticking of an old clock on the wall. I stared at the check she had sent me, its crisp paper mocking me with its false sense of apology. I knew that accepting the money would be tantamount to forgiving her, a notion I could never entertain. Instead, I began to formulate a plan, one that would serve as a final and unambiguous lesson in the consequences of betrayal. I started by gathering evidence. I went through every detail of the wedding day, meticulously noting every moment that now served as a reminder of her treachery. I contacted the bartender, who confirmed that my drink had been tampered with, and I preserved text messages and voicemails that hinted at her hostile intentions. The more evidence I collected, the clearer it became that she had orchestrated the entire debacle, not only to ruin my wedding, but also to assert her dominance over my husband's choices. Armed with the undeniable truth, I decided to confront her, but not in a way that would simply rehash the past. I planned a counterstrike that was as precise as it was elegant. My revenge needed to be both satisfying and irreversible, a message delivered with the cold precision of a masterstroke. I crafted a letter addressed to her, a letter that laid bare every transgression, every malicious act that had turned what should have been a day of joy into a bitter spectacle of deceit. In the letter, I recounted every detail of that night, the way I felt, the betrayal I experienced, and the undeniable proof of her sabotage. I made sure it was unyielding, leaving no room for reinterpretation or apology. After I sent the letter, I began to spread the truth in subtle yet far-reaching ways. I reached out to key members of our social circle, trusted family friends, who had been privy to the dynamics of our relationship for years. I ensured that every detail of my ordeal was known, from the subtle manipulations leading up to the wedding to the deliberate act of spiking my drink. I wanted everyone to see her for who she truly was, a manipulator willing to stoop to any level to exert control and inflict pain. I wasn't seeking public humiliation for its own sake. I simply wanted the truth to be known, so that no one else would ever fall victim to her toxic influence. In the weeks that followed, the effects of my revelations began to manifest. Conversations and family gatherings turned tense whenever her name was mentioned. Mutual acquaintances who once spoke of her in glowing terms now exchanged skeptical glances and cautious remarks. My husband, who had always seemed caught in the middle, began to distance himself from her influence as the evidence piled up. It wasn't long before the consequences of her actions began to ripple through our family. I wasn't interested in a messy divorce or a dramatic public feud. I simply wanted to reclaim the dignity that had been stolen from me that fateful night. I started to rebuild my life piece by piece, refusing to let the incident define me. I sought out therapy to help process the emotional scars and to rebuild my self-worth. I immersed myself in my work and the hobbies I had long abandoned, determined to rediscover the passion and joy that had once lit up my life. Every step I took was a step away from the betrayal and a step toward reclaiming the person I was meant to be. As time passed, the wounds began to heal, though the scars remained as a constant reminder of the treachery I had endured. My mother-in-law's attempts at reconciliation, including the $5,000 check and repeated apologies, fell on deaf ears. I made it clear that money could never replace the trust and respect that she had so callously shattered. Every interaction with her became a lesson in boundaries and self-respect, and I found solace in the fact that I had taken control of my narrative rather than allowing her to dictate it. One particular encounter still burns in my memory. I was attending a small family gathering, one that my husband had reluctantly agreed to attend in order to keep up appearances. The atmosphere was tense, and I could feel the unspoken animosity between me and my mother-in-law like a heavy fog in the room. As we sat across from each other at the dinner table, I noticed the subtle glances exchanged between her and a few other relatives. They all seemed to be silently acknowledging the truth that I had so painstakingly revealed to everyone who cared to listen. When she finally tried to make a feeble, conciliatory remark about the good old days, I calmly reminded her of the events that had transpired on my wedding day. My voice was low and measured, each word deliberate and final. I told her that I would never forget, and I would never forgive. That night, as I left the gathering with a quiet sense of vindication, I realized that my revenge was complete, not through grand gestures or public spectacle, but through the quiet dismantling of her carefully constructed facade. In the months that followed, I found strength in the knowledge that I had stood up for myself. I began sharing my story in online communities where others who had experienced betrayal could find solace and understanding. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. Strangers wrote to me, thanking me for exposing the truth and encouraging me to continue living my life on my own terms. Their words reminded me that I wasn't alone, that my experience, as painful as it was, had a meaning and a purpose. I was no longer a victim, but a survivor, and my journey toward healing was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. There were moments of quiet reflection, times when I revisited the details of that dreadful night in my mind. I analyzed every conversation, every look, searching for clues I might have missed. I realized that my mother-in-law's actions were not the result of a momentary lapse in judgment, but of a long-standing desire to control every aspect of my life, even on the day that was supposed to be mine. The betrayal stung, not only because of the physical danger I had been put in, but because it was a violation of the trust that is supposed to be the foundation of any relationship, especially within a family. I resolved then that I would never allow anyone to undermine my self-worth again. Even as I moved forward, I made sure that the memory of that night served as a warning to anyone who might try to cross me in the future. I cultivated a reputation for being unyielding when it came to protecting my own interests and the interests of those I loved. I wasn't interested in reconciliation or compromise with someone who had once tried to destroy me, and I made that abundantly clear in every interaction. My mother-in-law's offers of money, her pleas for forgiveness, were met with a cool indifference. I had learned that some wounds are too deep to heal with mere apologies or financial compensation. The final chapter in this saga came unexpectedly. My husband, torn between the two women who had defined so much of his life, finally took a stand. In a quiet, private conversation, he told me that he could no longer live in the shadow of his mother's manipulations. His words were measured and sincere, and while they couldn't undo the damage that had been done, they helped me to finally see that I was not alone in this struggle. His decision to distance himself from her toxic influence was not only a victory for our marriage, but also a signal that I had won a moral victory over the forces that had once threatened to consume me. Now, whenever I reflect on that chaotic day, I feel no regret, only the resolute determination to protect my dignity and the unyielding conviction that I will never be a victim again. The betrayal of my mother-in-law remains a painful memory, but it is also a source of strength. I have emerged from the ordeal with a newfound clarity and an unshakable resolve to live my life on my own terms. The scars may never fully fade, but they are a testament to the battles I have fought and the victories I have won. I share my story not to dwell on the past, but to serve as a reminder to anyone who has ever been betrayed that revenge, when carried out with cold precision and unwavering resolve, can be a path to reclaiming one's life. I have learned that forgiveness is not always necessary, especially when the betrayal is so profound that it cuts to the core of one's being. My mother-in-law may still try to reach out with money or hollow apologies, but I have long since drawn the line. My future is not defined by her actions, nor is my worth measured by her attempts to manipulate the narrative. I am the architect of my own destiny, a destiny built on strength, honesty, and an uncompromising commitment to justice. In the end, my wedding day will always be marred by the memory of that fateful incident. Yet, through it all, I have grown stronger. I have learned that the most powerful revenge is not one that destroys an enemy, but one that transforms a victim into a survivor. I refuse to let betrayal define me. I stand as living proof that even in the darkest of moments, there is a light that can guide you toward a future free of regret and full of empowerment. This is my story, a chronicle of betrayal, survival, and the quiet triumph of standing up for oneself. I share it in the hope that those who have experienced similar injustices will find the courage to reclaim their power. To my mother-in-law, I say this: your attempt to ruin my life has only made me stronger. I have built my own fortress out of the remnants of your treachery, and in doing so, I have ensured that your cruelty will never again cast a shadow over my life. I will continue to live my life with the full knowledge that I have overcome a betrayal that many would have allowed to destroy them. My journey was not an easy one, and the scars are a permanent reminder of the night when everything changed. But I embrace those scars as symbols of my resilience and the unwavering belief that I deserve nothing less than a life defined by truth, respect, and an unbreakable will to succeed. In sharing this tale, I hope that anyone who reads these words finds solace in the knowledge that even the most harrowing betrayals can lead to a rebirth of strength. I refuse to let bitterness consume me. Instead, I let it fuel my determination to move forward and never look back. The events of that wedding day have become a part of my past, a past that I have learned from and grown beyond. And while I will never forget the pain of betrayal, I will always remember the empowering moment when I decided to reclaim my destiny, with every step of my journey proving that I am the master of my fate, and no one will ever rob me of that truth again. My revenge was not a moment of explosive anger or public spectacle, but a quiet, deliberate assertion of my right to control my own narrative. I stand here today, scarred but unbroken, as a testament to the fact that when you choose to fight back against injustice, you pave the way for a future where you are never again defined by someone else's cruelty. I forged my own path, and with each step, I left behind the shackles of betrayal, determined to live a life that is all my own. The journey was arduous, but it was mine, and in that journey, I discovered that true strength comes from within. Every day, I wake up with a clear mind and an unyielding resolve, knowing that I have overcome the darkness that once threatened to consume me. I choose to look forward, to embrace the beauty of life, and to never allow anyone to undermine my worth again. My wedding day may have been tarnished by deceit, but the future I now build is filled with promise and an unwavering belief in the power of self-respect. This is my victory, a quiet, unassailable triumph over betrayal, one that will serve as a beacon of hope for anyone who has ever been wronged. I leave you with this final thought: never allow anyone to dictate the course of your life. In the end, the only person who has the power to define you is yourself. I chose to rise above the betrayal, to confront it head-on, and in doing so, I reclaimed not only my wedding day, but my very soul. My story is one of survival, of a slow and deliberate revenge that was more satisfying than any fleeting moment of anger could ever be. And though my mother-in-law may continue to offer her hollow apologies and attempts at restitution, I have long ago moved past the need for forgiveness. I have learned that some wounds are too deep to mend, and sometimes the only just response is to forge ahead, stronger and more determined than ever. This is the legacy I now carry, a legacy built on the foundation of resilience, truth, and an unyielding commitment to never be undermined again. My life is mine to live, and no act of betrayal will ever change that. Discovered my wife's secret, Hawaii getaway, with her lover, so I tipped off the DEA after planting Doug's in their luggage. Watched them get arrested at the airport. She got 5 years, he got 15. I never imagined that the day I discovered my wife's secret getaway would be the day my entire world crumbled, and then be rebuilt from the ashes into something far more powerful. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'm not bitter either. I did what I had to do, and I stand by every calculated move I made. This is my story, raw and unfiltered, and I'm telling it here because sometimes the truth is the only thing that can set you free. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday. I was at home, slogging through emails and planning the week ahead, when a single text message shattered the mundane rhythm of my day. It was from an unknown number, and the message was short, almost cryptic. You might want to check her phone. At first, I thought it was a prank, some sick joke from a coworker trying to mess with my head. But as minutes turned to hours and no one else mentioned it, my curiosity turned to dread. I picked up my wife's phone when she was in the shower, justifying it as an innocent check for a misplaced device. I'd done it before, a habit born out of my own insecurities, but never to this extent. I opened her text messages and discovered a string of conversations that were anything but mundane. The messages were laden with affectionate nicknames, secret jokes, and the kind of planning that could only belong to lovers sneaking around behind closed doors. My heart pounded as I scrolled through screenshots of plane tickets and vague references to paradise. It hit me then. I was not the only one who had a ticket to our life, and she had clearly reserved another seat for someone else. The shock of betrayal sent my mind into a frantic whirl. I replayed every moment from the past few months, every excuse and every late night working from home that now seemed a poorly constructed alibi. Anger mixed with disbelief as I realized that not only had she been unfaithful, but she'd also built a secret life without me, a life filled with stolen moments on a Hawaiian beach under a different sun. I confronted her that evening as she returned from what she claimed was a business dinner. I held up her phone, the incriminating evidence laid out like a scar across her polished exterior. The words escaped her in a flurry of panicked apologies and feigned regret, but I wasn't interested in her tears. I didn't want an explanation. I wanted consequences. I wanted to see her pay for the betrayal that had shattered the trust between us. For weeks, I wrestled with my anger and the urge to simply destroy her life as a form of retribution. But as I lay awake at night, I realized that the man I was before this revelation was long gone. I wasn't going to be the forgiving, downtrodden husband any longer. I was going to be the architect of my own justice. And so, I began to plan, meticulously, methodically, my revenge. My first step was to gather evidence of her betrayal. I saved every message, every email, every slip of the finger that revealed her secret rendezvous. But it wasn't enough. I needed something big, something irreversible. And then it struck me, if she was having an affair, then her lover was deeply involved. I could use that connection to my advantage. I began to watch them from afar, learning their patterns and routines. I followed them discreetly as they traveled together. I discovered that they had booked a lavish vacation to Hawaii, a paradise that, in their minds, symbolized their escape from the mundane confines of their lives. The decision was made in a moment of cold clarity. I realized that if I could somehow expose them, not only would I be avenging my betrayal, but I'd be sending a message to anyone who dared to cross me. And what better way to do that than to involve the DEA? In a world where justice was often a matter of perspective, I was going to become the arbiter of their fate. I spent days researching the DEA's procedures, finding out exactly how they operated and what kind of evidence they needed to make an arrest. It wasn't long before I discovered that they were actively investigating drug trafficking routes, and the smuggling of narcotics via international travel was one of their top priorities. The plan began to form in my mind like a dark, twisted blueprint. I would plant drugs in their luggage, not a huge amount, just enough to trigger suspicion, to set off alarms during routine checks. And then, when the DEA swooped in, I'd be the one holding the evidence of their crimes. I had never been one to stoop to criminal behavior, but sometimes the line between right and wrong blurs when you're drowning in betrayal. I knew the risks were high. If I were caught, there would be no redemption, no chance to reclaim the shattered pieces of my life. But I had already passed the point of no return. My heart had hardened into something unrecognizable, a weapon forged by lies, deceit, and the raw, unrelenting pain of betrayal. I began by tracking the flights and schedules of the two. Every detail was memorized and noted down. I even managed to obtain access to the itinerary through a friend who worked in airport security, a friend I never thought I'd have to call upon. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about exacting a punishment so fitting that it would forever haunt them. When the day finally came, I was already a bundle of nerves and grim determination. I headed to the airport early in the morning, positioning myself in a secluded corner where I wouldn't be disturbed. I watched the stream of travelers with a detached interest, knowing that soon my orchestrated moment of retribution would unfold. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out a small packet of a white powder that I had painstakingly acquired and hidden away. It was nothing too potent, just enough to mimic the signature of a dangerous contraband substance, and I had ensured it was packaged in a way that made it seem like a careless smuggling attempt. I followed them from a distance as they made their way through the terminal. The look on their faces was a mixture of smug confidence and unspoken arrogance, as if they believed themselves untouchable. I kept my distance, my eyes fixed on every move they made, every word exchanged, every fleeting glance that confirmed their complicity. In that moment, I wasn't just watching a couple. I was witnessing the final act of their farce, the inevitable collapse of their double life. When they reached the baggage check-in, I made my move. I slipped into an unguarded service area nearby and quietly planted the packet in the liner of their suitcase. The act itself was almost surreal in its simplicity, a single, silent gesture that would soon unravel everything. With the packet in place, I exhaled a slow, steady breath, knowing that my carefully laid plan was about to pay off. I didn't linger. I returned to my hidden corner and watched as the suitcase, now marked with the seed of their downfall, made its way onto the conveyor belt. I retreated from my vantage point and waited, every second stretching into eternity. It wasn't long before the fateful announcement came over the loudspeakers, an alert about suspicious luggage on Flight 782 bound for Los Angeles. I knew then that the net was closing in around them. The arrest was swift and decisive. I remember the chaos vividly, the flashing lights, the shouts of the agents, and the disbelieving expressions on their faces as they were handcuffed and led away. It was as if the final curtain had fallen on their deceitful performance. In that instant, I felt a surge of satisfaction so intense that it almost overwhelmed me. I knew that they would face the consequences of their actions, and there was no coming back from that moment. In the days that followed, the media buzzed with the story of the daring bust at the airport. Headlines blared about the arrest of a couple involved in a high-profile drug smuggling ring, and the details only deepened the intrigue. It wasn't until later, when the official statements were released, that I learned of the harsh sentences handed down. My wife received a 5-year term for her minor role, while her lover was sentenced to 15 years for his central involvement. I don't say I celebrated, not in the conventional sense, but there was a cold, clinical satisfaction in knowing that justice, in its own twisted way, had been served. The fallout was as unexpected as it was inevitable. I was questioned by authorities for a brief period, and my involvement was scrutinized from every angle. I never admitted to a thing. After all, the evidence was carefully planted, and I had taken every precaution to ensure that I remained the unseen puppeteer behind their downfall. The DEA's investigation was thorough, and I watched from afar as their once pristine lives disintegrated into a cautionary tale. Every time I saw the news or read an article about the bust, I felt that familiar mixture of vindication and numb detachment. The memories of betrayal still lingered, but they were now overshadowed by the weight of the retribution I had orchestrated. In the quiet moments that followed the storm, I found myself reflecting on the series of events that had led to this point. I wasn't a monster. I was a man who had been pushed to the brink by the ultimate betrayal. I had loved her once, with every fiber of my being, but that love had been poisoned by lies and deceit. I had hoped for an explanation, an apology, or even a shred of remorse, but all I received was a rehearsed script of regret that didn't cut through the ice that had formed around my heart. I realized then that forgiveness was not an option. To forgive would have been to relinquish the very essence of the punishment I believed she deserved. And so, I chose revenge over reconciliation, a choice that would haunt me for years to come, yet one that I knew was the only path to reclaiming my shattered dignity. Some nights, I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the memories of that day replaying like a slow-motion film. I see the smug satisfaction on their faces as they were led away, and I wonder if, in some twisted way, they understood the magnitude of what I had done. There's no joy in revenge, only a grim acceptance that sometimes the scales of justice can only be balanced by actions that defy conventional morality. I never intended to become a vigilante, but circumstances had forced my hand. I did what I had to do, and now I must live with the consequences. I know that many would judge me harshly if they learned the full extent of my actions. Some might even call me a criminal, a traitor to the very laws I once held dear. But what they fail to understand is that sometimes the law is a tool for the corrupt, a shield for those who betray trust and destroy lives. I wasn't blind to the irony of my actions. I knew that by turning to the DEA, I was embracing a version of justice that was as flawed as it was effective. But in the end, wasn't it all about making them pay? My wife had betrayed me, and her lover had not only shared in that betrayal, but had actively helped construct the illusion of a perfect life, one that was built on lies. I stripped away that illusion piece by piece until there was nothing left but the harsh reality of their crimes. As the years have passed since that fateful day, I've often been asked whether I regret my choices. The answer is complicated. Regret implies that one wishes to undo the past, to return to a time when things were simpler. But the truth is, I can't undo what's been done, and I wouldn't want to. Every sleepless night, every bitter memory, is a reminder that I once had the courage to stand up and take control of my destiny. I became something I never thought I'd be, a man who wouldn't hesitate to exact his own form of justice. And though the scars of betrayal remain, they serve as a constant reminder of the price of deceit. To this day, I receive the occasional anonymous message, some congratulatory note from a stranger who read about the bust in the papers, others a cryptic warning that I had made powerful enemies. I have learned to live with the fact that my actions have repercussions, that the line between right and wrong is often blurred in the search for justice. There are times when I walk past the airport and a familiar chill runs down my spine, the memory of that orchestrated moment of retribution so vivid that it seems to haunt every corner of my mind. I've built a new life for myself since then, one that is quieter, more measured, and free from the shackles of past betrayals. I've learned to let go of the need for complete closure, accepting instead that some wounds, no matter how deeply inflicted, never truly heal. They simply become a part of who you are, a reminder of a time when the world turned its back on you and you had to take matters into your own hands. I share this story not as a confession, nor as a plea for sympathy, but as a testament to the lengths a person will go when pushed to the brink. I don't expect you to condone my actions or to see me as a hero. I'm merely a man who was betrayed, who decided that the only way to reclaim his dignity was to fight back in a way that was as unforgiving as the betrayal itself. And while some might say that true strength lies in forgiveness, I learned that sometimes true strength is found in the cold, calculated execution of one's own brand of justice. If you're reading this and have ever been wronged, know that you have the power to take back control of your life. There is no one-size-fits-all solution to the pain of betrayal, and sometimes the road to reclaiming your self-worth is paved with decisions that defy conventional morality. I made my choice, and though it cost me dearly, it allowed me to rise from the wreckage of my past and forge a future where I am in control. I no longer live in the shadow of my wife's deceit, but in the light of my own resilience. Some nights, when the memory of that fateful airport arrest creeps in, I allow myself a moment of quiet reflection. I replay the scene over and over, the smug arrogance in their eyes as the agents took them away, the finality in their defeated expressions, and the undeniable satisfaction of knowing that I had dismantled the web of lies they had so carefully spun. In that moment, I wasn't just avenging a betrayal, I was reclaiming my identity. I was proving to myself and to the world that I was not someone to be trifled with. And so, as I sit here writing this, I am aware that my actions will forever remain a controversial chapter in my life. I can't say that I sleep soundly at night, nor can I claim that I haven't lost a part of myself in the process. But I also know that I made a choice to stand up against the injustice that had been inflicted upon me. I never forgave my wife, not because I was incapable of forgiveness, but because to forgive would have meant surrendering the very essence of my self-worth. I had to let her feel the weight of her betrayal, and in doing so, I ensured that she would never be able to mend the shattered pieces of the life we once shared. I hope that by sharing my story, those who have been betrayed in similar ways might find a flicker of hope in the darkness. Revenge is never a clean or simple solution, and the path I chose is fraught with moral ambiguity and personal sacrifice. But it is a path I walked with my eyes open, fully aware of the consequences that awaited me. I didn't do it for the thrill or for some misguided sense of heroism. I did it because I was left with no other choice. This is the truth as I see it. Betrayal leaves scars that can never fully fade, and sometimes the only way to heal is to let those scars be a permanent reminder of what you survived. I won't lie and say that the pain is entirely behind me. It lingers, a silent companion to every decision I make, every step I take. But I also know that I am stronger for having endured it. I've learned that in the face of deception and heartache, you have to be willing to fight for every scrap of dignity you believe is rightfully yours. To those who still trust implicitly, I offer no advice, only a cautionary tale. Life is unpredictable, and sometimes the people you love can become the architects of your downfall. It's a hard truth to swallow, but it's one that forced me to evolve from the man I once was into someone who would not be taken advantage of again. I stand as a testament to the idea that while betrayal can shatter your world, it can also, if you let it, forge you into something far more resilient and unyielding. As the years roll on and the echoes of that fateful day become part of my past, I carry with me the understanding that revenge is not a one-time act, but a journey. One that demands constant vigilance, unwavering resolve, and the acceptance that sometimes justice is a personal battle fought on your own terms. I know that I will forever bear the marks of what I've done, but I also know that in each scar lies the story of my survival, the testament of my refusal to be broken by the duplicity of those I once loved. Now, when I see couples laughing in cafes or families reuniting at airports, I'm reminded of both the fragility and the resilience of trust. I may have lost my wife to her own betrayals, but in doing so, I gained something I never expected, the power to rewrite my own destiny. I became a man who refused to be a victim, someone who would rather confront the darkness head-on than cower in the shadows of regret. This story isn't just about a revenge that played out on a cold, unforgiving day at an airport. It's about the transformation of a man who was once blinded by love and trust, only to be awakened by the harsh reality of betrayal. It's about the moment when I chose to turn my pain into power, to reclaim a sense of self that had been stripped away by lies and infidelity. And most of all, it's about the relentless pursuit of a justice that, while not perfect, was as real as the scars I carry. I know that some will judge me, some will say that I crossed a line that should never be crossed. But I also know that if you've ever had your heart shattered by betrayal, you'll understand that sometimes the only way to survive is to let your actions speak louder than words. I never asked for forgiveness and I never sought redemption. All I sought was a measure of retribution, a way to make sure that the ones who wronged me would live with the consequences of their choices every single day. And so, I share my story with you, not as a caution, but as a declaration of the power that lies in taking control of your own fate. I am not a hero, and I am certainly not a saint. I am simply a man who refused to be defined by the treachery of those who betrayed him. I chose a path that many would consider dark, but in that darkness, I found the strength to rise again. I built my new life from the ruins of the old, and every day is a reminder that I have the power to shape my destiny no matter how deeply I've been wounded. In the end, justice was served. My wife got 5 years, and her lover got 15. It wasn't a perfect resolution, and it certainly wasn't a victory for love or forgiveness. It was, instead, a harsh lesson in the brutal realities of trust, betrayal, and the lengths one man will go to protect his own dignity. I made my choices, I lived with the consequences, and I now move forward with the knowledge that I will never again be a victim of deceit. I reclaimed my life with the cold precision of a man who has nothing left to lose and everything to gain. This is my story, a story of betrayal, revenge, and the relentless pursuit of justice. I've shared it here so that anyone who's ever been wronged might find a spark of the strength I discovered in the darkest of times. Let it be a reminder that even when you've been shattered by betrayal, you have the power to rise, to fight, and to rebuild a life that is unmistakably your own. I did what I had to do, and though the scars remain, they are now badges of a hard-won victory, a permanent reminder that in the face of treachery, I never back down. I never thought that my birthday would turn into the catalyst for a series of events that completely upended my life. Yet, there I was, sitting alone in my room on what was supposed to be a day of celebration, drowning in bitter disbelief. I had always felt overlooked in my own family, but nothing could have prepared me for the cold, calculated indifference that day. My parents had canceled my birthday plans in favor of sending my spoiled sister on a luxurious trip with her friends. No explanation was given, just a curt, dismissive text message that left me reeling. I remember the precise moment I found out. I was scrolling through my messages when I saw the notification from my parents. The words were clinical, devoid of any warmth or remorse. "Your birthday celebration is canceled. Enjoy your day." It was as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience, a problem to be swept aside in favor of more glamorous pursuits. In that instant, a spark of fury ignited deep inside me, one that I hadn't known existed until that moment. I felt betrayed not only by my parents, but by the very system that had always made me feel disposable. It wasn't just about the cancellation, it was the symbolism behind it. My sister, who had always been the family's golden child, was given everything without earning it, while I was left to fend for myself. I'd spent months planning a modest but heartfelt celebration with a few close friends. I even went out of my way to make arrangements that would make the day special, but none of that mattered to them. Instead, they invested their time and money in a frivolous trip for her, an indulgence that felt like a slap in the face. The betrayal cut deep, and I vowed right then that I would never allow their neglect to define me. I didn't confide in anyone at first. I bottled up my anger and disappointment, convincing myself that I was overreacting, that maybe I was being overly sensitive. But as days turned into weeks, the sting of their betrayal only grew more pronounced. Every family gathering became a painful reminder of my insignificance. My sister would casually mention her trip as if it were a badge of honor, while I sat there in silence, my heart pounding with a mix of grief and simmering rage. In the midst of this internal storm, an unexpected lifeline emerged: my grandpa. He had always been the quiet observer in the background, a man whose wisdom and calm presence provided a stark contrast to the tumult of our family. One chilly afternoon, as I sat in my room stewing over the injustice, Grandpa knocked on my door. He had aged well, his face a map of experiences and hardships, but his eyes were as piercing as ever. "Come on, kiddo," he said softly, gesturing for me to join him on the small, worn-out couch in the living room. "Let's talk." At first, I hesitated. I wasn't used to sharing my deepest feelings, especially with someone who seemed so detached from our family's petty conflicts. But there was something in his tone, a genuine concern that disarmed my defenses. I poured out my heart, every ounce of pent-up frustration and sorrow spilling out like a torrent. I told him about the canceled birthday, the humiliating text, and the ever-growing sense of betrayal that had become my constant companion. Grandpa listened intently, his gaze never wavering from mine. When I finally fell silent, he sighed deeply. "I'm not surprised," he said, his voice tinged with a sorrow that mirrored my own. "Your parents have always been more interested in appearances than in substance. They've let you believe for too long that their love was conditional on what you could do for them." His words struck me like a bolt of lightning. I had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed by someone who had seen the rise and fall of our family dynamics was both painful and liberating. "What can I do?" I asked, desperation creeping into my tone. "I can't keep living like this, feeling worthless." Grandpa leaned forward, his eyes burning with a quiet intensity. "You deserve better than their empty promises. I'm tired of watching them treat you like a burden. I'm willing to help you if you're willing to make a change." Over the next few weeks, Grandpa and I formulated a plan. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a carefully calculated escape from a lifetime of neglect. I made the most difficult decision of my life. I was going to move out. I packed my belongings, said a few terse goodbyes, and left the suffocating confines of the home that had never truly been mine. The day I walked out the door for the last time, I felt a mix of liberation and dread. I was stepping into a world of uncertainty, yet I also felt the weight of years of mistreatment finally lifting from my shoulders. I was heading toward a future where I wouldn't be defined by my parents' choices, a future where I could reclaim my sense of self. Grandpa welcomed me into his modest apartment, a small but comfortable space that he had transformed into a haven for those who, like me, had been cast aside by the family they once trusted. Living with Grandpa was a revelation. He had a way of making the simplest moments feel profound, of turning everyday conversations into life lessons. Over time, he shared stories of his own struggles and disappointments, tales of how he had once been blinded by loyalty to those who ultimately betrayed him. His honesty was raw and unfiltered, and it resonated with me. For the first time, I began to see that I wasn't alone in my suffering. I was part of a larger narrative of resilience and defiance. But our newfound sanctuary was not without its challenges. Word of my departure spread quickly through the family grapevine, and it wasn't long before my parents tried to reel me back in. Their phone calls, laden with guilt and feigned concern, became a constant interruption. "We're sorry," they'd say. "We didn't mean to hurt you. Please come back home." Each call felt like a rehearsed script, devoid of any real emotion or remorse. I listened to their pleas with a detached calm, my heart hardened by the betrayal I had endured. I wasn't willing to forgive them, not when their actions had spoken louder than any apology ever could. Instead, I resolved to let my life speak for itself. With Grandpa's steady support, I began to build a new existence, one where I controlled my destiny and no longer allowed anyone else to dictate my worth. As the weeks turned into months, I started to notice subtle changes in my parents' behavior. They grew increasingly desperate, their attempts at reconciliation turning into a series of frantic, ill-conceived schemes. I soon discovered that their finances were crumbling, a consequence of years of mismanagement and indulgence. My sister's lavish trip had been just the tipping point, a symbol of their misplaced priorities. It wasn't long before Grandpa, who had watched the family's decline with a mixture of pity and disillusionment, took drastic measures. He cut off their financial support, severing the lifeline that had kept them afloat for so long. I remember the day he told me about it. We were sitting at the kitchen table, sipping on lukewarm coffee, when he dropped the bombshell. "They're on their own now," he said almost casually. "No more money, no more handouts. They need to learn that actions have consequences." That simple statement set off a chain reaction. My parents, desperate and cornered, began to lash out in ways that were as pitiful as they were vindictive. Their true feelings, long masked by a veneer of politeness and self-righteousness, began to surface. In whispered conversations and furtive glances, they admitted that I was never more than an afterthought, a reluctant burden that had only been tolerated for the sake of appearances. It was as if the removal of their financial cushion had stripped away all pretense, exposing the raw, unvarnished truth of their neglect. The revelation was as painful as it was satisfying. I felt a grim sense of justice settling in my bones, a validation of every moment I had felt small and unworthy. For the first time in years, I was free from the constant barrage of self-doubt and guilt that had been instilled in me by a family that never truly cared. The betrayal was complete, and I had no desire to mend the broken ties. Forgiveness was not on the menu. Revenge was the only language that made sense. I began to document everything, every slight, every dismissive remark, every instance of neglect. I meticulously compiled evidence of their cruelty, gathering texts, emails, and even recording snippets of conversations when I had the opportunity. I knew that one day I would expose them for who they really were. And that day came sooner than I expected. A few months after moving in with Grandpa, I decided it was time to take the next step. I created an online post detailing my experiences, a cathartic outpouring that resonated with countless others who had been hurt by similar betrayals. The post quickly went viral, sparking a wave of support and validation from strangers who recognized themselves in my words. It wasn't just a story, it was a manifesto against the hypocrisy of those who valued appearance over substance. The backlash was immediate. My parents, already reeling from their financial downfall, were forced to confront the harsh reality of their actions. I watched as their carefully constructed world crumbled in real time, each lie and half-truth laid bare for the public to see. The exposure was both a personal vindication and a public reckoning. I wasn't seeking fame or fortune. I simply wanted the truth to be known, to free myself from the chains of guilt and self-loathing that had bound me for so long. In the ensuing weeks, the tide of public opinion turned decisively in my favor. I received messages from people who had been in similar situations, each sharing their own stories of neglect and betrayal. It was a bittersweet validation. I knew that my pain was not unique, but it also underscored the pervasive cruelty of a system that favored privilege over empathy. My parents, on the other hand, were left isolated and humiliated. Their true nature, once hidden behind polite smiles and empty promises, was now an open secret. Grandpa's quiet satisfaction was perhaps the most rewarding of all. He never sought recognition or glory. His actions were driven by a desire for fairness and integrity. I often caught him smiling quietly to himself, as if the universe had finally balanced the scales. His support had been unwavering, a beacon of stability in a storm of betrayal. Together, we had rewritten the narrative, a narrative where the powerless took control and demanded accountability. In the months that followed, I continued to rebuild my life. I secured a job that respected my talents and allowed me to regain my independence. I moved into a small apartment near Grandpa's, close enough to share in his wisdom, but far enough to cultivate my own identity. The scars of my past remained, but they served as a reminder of the strength it took to rise above the pain. Every day was a step toward reclaiming the dignity that had been so long denied me. I'll never forget the day I received a final, desperate call from my parents. They were at their lowest point, their voices cracking with a mixture of shame and anger. "Please, come back," they pleaded, their words tinged with the desperate hope of someone clinging to the remnants of a shattered illusion. But I knew better. I had already moved on, leaving behind the remnants of a life that had never truly been mine. I answered the call with a calm finality that I hoped would echo in their hearts, a final chapter in a long, painful book of betrayal. Now, as I look back on that tumultuous period of my life, I realized that the pain was not in the betrayal itself, but in the realization of what I had been missing all along: a sense of self-worth. The experience forced me to confront the harsh realities of my family's hypocrisy and to carve out my own identity in the midst of chaos. I had learned that forgiveness was not a remedy for wounds inflicted by the ones who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Instead, I embraced a different form of justice, one that was rooted in self-respect and the refusal to be defined by others. My story is not one of redemption through reconciliation. It is a tale of liberation, a journey from the suffocating confines of a broken family to the vast, uncharted territory of self-discovery. I found solace in the knowledge that I was finally free from the toxic influences that had once dictated my every move. The betrayal I suffered was deep, but the revenge I exacted was sweeter. A vindication that resonated not only in the echoes of my shattered past, but in the bright promise of a future built on my own terms. To anyone out there who has ever felt discarded by those who were meant to cherish them, I offer this: stand tall, even in the face of betrayal. Embrace the anger, let it fuel your determination, and never allow yourself to be diminished by the cruelty of others. My journey taught me that sometimes the only way to reclaim your life is to walk away from the ones who refuse to see your value, to seek refuge with those who recognize the worth that lies within you. I still remember the quiet moments with Grandpa, the simple dinners where we shared more than just food. We shared wisdom, hope, and the unspoken understanding that life could be rebuilt from the ashes of our pain. His unwavering support was the cornerstone of my transformation, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there are those who will stand by you without expecting anything in return. Looking back, I realized that my parents' betrayal was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I reclaimed my voice, built a life defined by my own choices, and embraced the freedom that comes from no longer being shackled by the expectations of others. In that journey, I found strength, clarity, and above all, the knowledge that I deserved better. Today, I live a life that is unburdened by the ghosts of my past. I have learned that true revenge is not about petty retribution. It is about reclaiming your dignity and refusing to be defined by the actions of those who have wronged you. The story of my birthday, the canceled celebration, and the fallout that followed is a reminder that sometimes the harshest betrayals can lead to the most profound transformations. I carry the scars of that day like badges of honor, symbols of a battle fought and won. I will never forget the feeling of isolation when my birthday was canceled, nor will I ever forget the quiet determination that drove me to leave behind a life of neglect. Every step I take now is a testament to the power of self-belief and the unwavering support of those who truly care. My parents may have exposed their true feelings in the end, but in doing so, they also revealed the strength that lay hidden within me all along. Now, as I sit here reflecting on the journey that has brought me to this moment, I am filled with a sense of calm certainty. I am not defined by their mistakes or my past. I have carved out a future where I am in control, where I set the rules, and where the echoes of betrayal have been replaced by the steady rhythm of a life rebuilt on my own terms. I owe it all to that one fateful birthday, a birthday that was stolen, but in the end, became the turning point of my life. The lessons I've learned are hard-won but invaluable. I have discovered that sometimes the most painful experiences are the ones that force you to grow beyond the confines of a toxic past. My decision to walk away was not an act of weakness, but a declaration of self-respect. I realized that forgiveness was not required, and in fact, would have only meant giving them the power to define me. Instead, I chose to embrace the bitterness of betrayal as a catalyst for change, a reminder that I was stronger than their indifference and more resilient than their shallow affections. As I move forward, I remain ever vigilant, aware of the fragility of trust and the ease with which it can be shattered. My journey is ongoing, a continuous effort to build a life free from the shadows of my past. I am grateful for the lessons learned and for the unwavering support of Grandpa, whose quiet wisdom helped me see the truth of my worth. My revenge was not one of violent retribution, but of living a life that defied their expectations, a life where every success was a testament to the fact that I was worth fighting for. In sharing my story, I hope to offer a glimmer of hope to those who feel abandoned and unworthy. I want you to know that your pain is real and your worth is immeasurable. Even when those who should cherish you fail to do so, remember that the strength to overcome lies within you. I have emerged from the wreckage of betrayal with my head held high, and I invite you to do the same. This is my story, a story of a birthday that was canceled, of a family that betrayed, and of a revenge that was not fueled by malice but by the relentless pursuit of dignity and self-respect. I have learned that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply living your life on your own terms. I will never forgive the betrayal of my parents, but I have found something far more precious in its wake: the unyielding belief in my own worth and the freedom to define my own destiny. There are moments when I still catch myself wondering what might have been if things had been different, if I had been the favored child. But then I remember that every moment of pain was a stepping stone to the person I am today, a person who refuses to be diminished by the cruelty of others. I have reclaimed my voice, my identity, and my future, leaving behind a past that no longer holds sway over me. I share this not out of bitterness, but out of a desire to empower those who have been wronged. Let my journey serve as a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, there is a path to redemption. Not through forgiveness of those who wronged you, but through the unwavering pursuit of your own worth. Every scar is a testament to the battles fought, and every day is an opportunity to rewrite your own story. I now stand on the precipice of a new beginning, one where the echoes of betrayal have given way to the sound of my own heartbeat, a steady, resolute reminder that I am, and always will be, enough. My parents may have canceled my birthday and shattered the illusion of a perfect family, but they could never cancel the fire that burns within me. And in that fire, I found the strength to leave, to fight back, and ultimately, to build a life that is truly my own. This is the story of how I turned a day of betrayal into a lifetime of triumph. A story that is as painful as it is liberating, as bitter as it is sweet. It is a reminder that sometimes the only way to heal is to rise up, to let the truth be known, and to walk away from the shadows of those who never truly saw you. I have chosen my path, and with every step I take, I honor the resilience of the human spirit. A spirit that refuses to be silenced, no matter how deep the wound. I am the sum of my experiences, and today I am free. I never imagined I'd be writing this, but I need to get it off my chest before I lose myself completely. I always thought my father's retirement would be a triumphant moment for our family business, a moment when I would finally be recognized as his rightful heir. Instead, I witnessed the ultimate betrayal that changed my life forever. It was supposed to be a celebration of a legacy, a moment when my dad would pass on everything he'd built to me, the one who'd been there every step of the way. But that night, everything shattered when he announced in front of everyone that his business would go to my brother-in-law, Tony. The words still ring in my ears: "You're a disappointment." For years, I dedicated myself to learning every facet of our company. I was there in the early mornings, the late nights, the tense board meetings, and even the quiet moments when I was left alone to figure out where I'd gone wrong. I had sacrificed a piece of my soul to prove I was worthy of carrying on Dad's legacy. I believed I had his trust and respect, but all that turned out to be a cruel illusion. My father's final act wasn't a gesture of confidence in me, it was an admission of his deep disillusionment. I remember that night vividly. The retirement party was held at a grand hall, decorated with memorabilia of decades spent building the company from nothing. Old colleagues, loyal employees, and distant relatives mingled under soft lights and celebratory music. I stood near the back, trying to muster a smile while my stomach churned with anxiety. The announcement was made in a booming voice that I knew belonged to my father, a man I had always admired for his sharp business acumen and uncompromising standards. But what he said next was something I could never have prepared for. My father took the stage, his eyes scanning the room with a mix of nostalgia and steely resolve. He began by thanking everyone for their loyalty and hard work, then slowly transitioned to the topic that had everyone on edge, the future of the company. I thought back on every sleepless night, every moment I had poured my energy into this business, believing it was my destiny to lead it forward. And then, with a calm that belied the weight of his words, he announced that the company's reins would be handed over to Tony, my brother-in-law. As if to punctuate the announcement, he added, "I'm sorry, but you were never what I expected. You've been a disappointment." The shock was suffocating. I felt every eye in the room, every whispered comment, as if the betrayal were a public spectacle. I could see the smug satisfaction on Tony's face, a face I once regarded as a brother, but now realized was nothing more than a mask hiding greed and entitlement. The humiliation cut deeper than any physical blow. It was as if every hour I'd dedicated to this company had been rendered worthless by one callous decision. I spent that night in a daze, wandering the empty corridors of the hotel where the party had been held. Every step felt heavy with the weight of shattered dreams and unspoken accusations. I recalled the countless conversations with my father where I had hoped to earn his approval, his pride. In every discussion about strategy and vision, I had seen glimmers of expectation in his eyes, an expectation that I would someday lead. Instead, I was being cast aside like a broken tool, replaced by someone I never saw as a threat. In the weeks that followed, the news spread like wildfire. I became the topic of hushed conversations among employees and relatives. The whispers were not of admiration or sympathy, but of pity and scorn. The sting of betrayal was compounded by the fact that those I trusted now saw me as the failure of the family. I found myself isolated, left with only the bitterness of a dream unfulfilled and a future stolen. I could have sunk into despair, allowed anger to consume me completely, but I refused to be the victim in my own story. Instead, I decided that if my father and Tony wanted to see me crumble, I would show them that I was far from broken. I set out to reclaim not only the respect I once had, but the very business that was rightfully mine. The road to revenge was not going to be easy, and it was not going to be a matter of impulsive acts of rage. It was going to be a long, calculated process, a meticulously crafted plan to expose the true nature of the man who had betrayed me and to wrest back control of what was built with sweat and honor. The first step was to understand every inch of the company from the inside. I had worked there all my life, and I knew its strengths, weaknesses, and the intricate web of relationships that held it together. I began quietly reaching out to trusted colleagues, those who had known me since I was a child, learning the ropes from Dad himself. I met with former mentors and loyal employees in secret, gathering not only their memories, but also evidence of the many decisions that had shaped the company over the decades. In hushed tones and under the cover of darkness, they told me stories that contradicted Tony's polished image. There were whispers of backroom deals, of unethical practices that had been swept under the rug. I listened intently, taking notes on every detail, knowing that these pieces of information could one day be used as ammunition against him. Every night, I pored over financial records and company archives, connecting dots that many had overlooked. I discovered discrepancies in accounts and questionable transactions that suggested Tony's rapid rise was built on a foundation of deception. The more I learned, the more certain I became that his takeover was not the culmination of merit, but the result of manipulation and a complete disregard for the legacy of our family. My heart ached with the realization that the man I once trusted, who was supposed to be part of our family, was nothing more than a charlatan. I spent months building a dossier, a meticulous compilation of evidence that I intended to use as leverage. I knew that if I wanted to reclaim my rightful place, I had to expose the truth to the board of directors, to the employees, and to anyone who still had a stake in the company. The plan was risky, and every move had to be calculated with precision. I worked quietly, often late into the night, balancing my outward facade of sorrow and resignation with the inner fire of determination. In the midst of this planning, I realized that Tony's overconfidence was his greatest vulnerability. He believed that the decision was final, that I had no recourse but to accept my fate. This arrogance gave me an opening, a chance to corner him in his own game. I began discreetly reaching out to key investors who had a personal stake in the company's future. I organized confidential meetings during which I presented them with the evidence I had gathered. I was careful to frame it not as a personal vendetta, but as a matter of preserving the integrity of the business that had sustained so many families for generations. Slowly but surely, I built a coalition of allies who began to question Tony's leadership and the ethical foundation of his decisions. Every interaction was laced with tension. I met with one investor after another, each conversation leaving me both exhilarated and exhausted. I knew that I was walking a tightrope, one misstep away from complete ruin, yet I was driven by a sense of justice that had been denied to me for so long. I wasn't just fighting for my pride, I was fighting for the legacy of our family, for the countless hours of labor that had been dedicated to building something meaningful. As the months passed, my secret network grew stronger. I arranged a meeting with several key board members under the guise of discussing future strategy. In that meeting, armed with my dossier, I laid out the damning evidence of Tony's mismanagement and unethical practices. The room fell silent as I recounted transaction after transaction, decision after decision that revealed a pattern of corruption. I could see the shock in their eyes, the realization that the man they had celebrated was not the visionary they believed him to be, but a con artist who had taken advantage of my father's trust. Tony was present at the meeting, his face contorted in a mixture of disbelief and barely contained fury. He tried to dismiss my allegations as petty grievances born of jealousy, but the evidence was irrefutable. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence in his leadership beginning to crumble. I watched as the tide slowly turned in my favor. For the first time since that fateful retirement party, I felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, justice would prevail. But I wasn't finished yet. The final piece of my plan was to confront my father directly. I needed answers. Why had he chosen Tony over me? What had I done to deserve this betrayal? I arranged to meet him in his study, a room filled with memories of a man who had once been my idol. As soon as he saw me, his face hardened, and I could see the remnants of the disappointment he had once harbored. I asked him the questions that had haunted me for years, and with a resigned sigh, he began to speak. He told me that his decision was not made in haste, that he had observed my performance with a critical eye. He cited mistakes, missed opportunities, and a lack of the ruthless drive needed to compete in the modern market. His words stung with a cold finality. I tried to defend myself, to argue that his criticisms were not only unfair but also a betrayal of the trust that had been the cornerstone of our relationship. But he would not listen. In his eyes, I was a disappointment, a failure who had never truly lived up to the promise of his legacy. That conversation left me hollow, a shell of the person I once believed I could be. But it also ignited a fire that I had never felt before. I realized that forgiveness was not an option. Trust had been shattered beyond repair, and my path forward was one of calculated retribution. I left his study with a resolve that was both bitter and unyielding. I would not allow him or Tony to dictate my future any longer. I would dismantle the empire they had built on betrayal, brick by brick, until the truth was undeniable and justice was served. The final phase of my plan was both daring and fraught with risk. I knew that to truly expose Tony's corruption, I needed to take the fight to the public sphere. I worked with a trusted journalist, someone who had a reputation for uncovering corporate scandals, to prepare a detailed exposé. Every fact was double-checked, every source confirmed. We sat for hours discussing the narrative, ensuring that the story would be both compelling and irrefutable. I provided him with every scrap of evidence I'd gathered, knowing that this was the moment when my entire effort would either vindicate me or be reduced to nothing more than the desperate cries of a defeated son. The exposé hit the news like a bombshell. Headlines screamed of corporate malfeasance, boardroom intrigue, and a betrayal that went deeper than anyone had imagined. As the story unfolded, public opinion swung in my favor. Investors began to pull their support from Tony's leadership, and the board of directors was forced to take decisive action. In a dramatic board meeting that echoed the tension of that long-ago retirement party, Tony was formally ousted from his position. The room was thick with the realization that the empire built on lies was crumbling before our eyes. I didn't feel a moment's satisfaction when the fall of Tony was confirmed. Instead, I was overcome with a cold resolve. My revenge was not a spur-of-the-moment act of violence or recklessness. It was a calculated reclamation of what had always been mine. I made it clear to everyone that I bore no ill will for those who had stood by me in silence. But as for my father, forgiveness was not in the cards. His words had cut too deep. His betrayal was too profound. I left that meeting with a clear message. Some wounds are never meant to heal. In the months that followed, I worked to rebuild the business with the allies who had remained loyal through it all. Every decision, every strategy was infused with the lessons of betrayal and the bitter taste of regret. I transformed the company from the inside out, instilling a culture of transparency, accountability, and merit. Slowly but surely, the enterprise began to regain the trust of its employees and investors. What had once been a family legacy marred by deceit was now evolving into something stronger, a testament to resilience in the face of betrayal. Yet, the scars of that fateful night never fully faded. I often find myself alone in the quiet of my office, staring at the portrait of my father that still hangs on the wall. It serves as a reminder of both the love I once held for him and the profound disappointment that led me down this path of retribution. I have no illusions about the cost of revenge. It has left me hardened, forever changed by the choices I was forced to make. But I also know that I cannot afford to look back. I have built something that is real and honest out of the wreckage of my shattered dreams, and that is all the vindication I need. Looking back, I realize that this isn't just a story of personal failure and family betrayal. It's a tale of the lengths one will go to reclaim their dignity when everything is taken away. I have no regrets about the actions I took, and I do not forgive the betrayal that set this chain of events in motion. There is no redemption for a man who casts aside the very blood that should have been his strength. The revenge I exacted wasn't fueled by blind rage. It was born of necessity, a means to an end. I had to dismantle a corrupt empire that had been built on my father's misplaced judgment, and in doing so, I had to erase the image of a man who would forever be defined by his cruelty. This journey taught me that sometimes the only way to move forward is to confront the darkness head-on. I have learned that true strength isn't found in forgiveness or in blind acceptance, but in the relentless pursuit of justice, even when it means sacrificing the one thing that once gave you purpose. I now lead a company that stands for integrity and hard work, a company that has been purified by the fires of betrayal and reborn in the wake of retribution. And while I may never fully escape the shadows of that fateful night, I have come to accept that my scars are a testament to the price of loyalty and the cost of misplaced trust. To anyone who has ever been betrayed by those they love, I offer this truth. Sometimes, the only way to honor your own worth is to rise from the ashes and forge a path that is uniquely your own. I will never forget the words that were spoken that night, nor the cold, hard reality they represented. I carry them with me as both a burden and a beacon, a constant reminder that while betrayal can shatter the strongest bonds, it can also ignite a fire that burns away the lies and reveals the truth beneath. I stand here today, not as the disappointed son my father once claimed I was, but as a man who reclaimed his destiny through unwavering resolve and a commitment to justice. I will never forgive the betrayal that was inflicted upon me, and I will never allow my past to define my future. In the end, the revenge I achieved was not just for myself, it was for every person who has ever been cast aside and told they were not enough. My story is a testament to the strength that lies within when one refuses to be broken, even in the face of the deepest betrayal. This is my truth, and while the scars will remain, they serve as a reminder of the price I paid and the victory I ultimately secured. The betrayal was absolute, the hurt immeasurable, and the path to revenge long and arduous. But in reclaiming my life and rebuilding what was lost, I proved that even in the darkest moments, there is a light that burns bright enough to guide you forward. And as I continue to lead with the lessons of the past etched into every decision I make, I know one thing for certain. Some betrayals demand a revenge that is as unforgiving as the wound itself, and I have delivered that justice with every calculated step I took. I never imagined that a single text message could shatter everything I had built. My heart, my plans, my future. Yet, there I was, staring at my phone in disbelief, as if the screen itself had betrayed me. I had been meticulously planning my wedding for over a year, envisioning a life of trust, shared dreams, and unconditional love. Instead, in one horrifying moment, my fiance's secret conversation with her ex unraveled every promise we had made. I felt like I was falling into an abyss of betrayal, and in that moment, every vow of forgiveness and every hope for a happy future evaporated from my mind. I had always been a believer in second chances, in the idea that love could overcome any obstacle, but nothing prepared me for the realization that the person I was about to marry had been dancing with deception behind my back. The texts were clear, a playful tone that hinted at rekindled feelings, clandestine emojis, and plans for secret meetups that were scheduled just a month before our wedding. How could I have been so blind? The shock was not just in the discovery, but in the betrayal itself. I had trusted her with everything, my vulnerabilities, my dreams, and my plans for a shared future. The fact that she chose to speak with someone from her past, someone who no longer belonged in her present, cut deeper than any knife. I spent hours pacing my apartment, the cold light of dawn replacing the darkness in my eyes. Every memory of us, the long walks, the whispered promises, the stolen glances, turned bitter as I replayed each moment in my head. It wasn't just the act of texting, it was the deception that lurked behind every carefully chosen word. I couldn't help but feel foolish for ever believing in the facade of loyalty she had constructed. Anger surged through me, a visceral mix of heartbreak and fury that left no room for forgiveness. I decided then and there that I wouldn't give her another chance. I wouldn't subject myself to further deceit or endure the humiliation of being second best. The decision came swiftly. I ghosted her. I deleted every contact, every social media connection that might remind me of what we once had. I canceled the wedding, the celebration that was supposed to mark a new chapter in our lives, and I packed my bags for a trip that I had always planned to take solo. A journey of rediscovery that now felt like the only antidote to my shattered world. In that moment, I wasn't running away. I was reclaiming my identity. I was telling the universe that I was not defined by someone else's betrayal, but by my own strength and resilience. The first few days on the trip were a blur of unfamiliar landscapes and introspective solitude. I rented a small room in a bustling coastal town, far from the memories that haunted me back home. Each morning, I would wake up to the sound of crashing waves and remind myself that nature's relentless power could heal even the deepest wounds. I spent hours walking along the shore, collecting pieces of driftwood that I later turned into small art pieces, a subtle reminder that from broken fragments, beauty could still emerge. In the midst of nature's raw splendor, I found solace in solitude and a quiet satisfaction in reclaiming my own narrative. Yet, as the days passed, a small part of me couldn't escape the constant reminder of what I had lost. There were moments when the silence was so profound it seemed to echo with the absence of her laughter and the ghost of her smile. But every time that nostalgia crept in, I reminded myself why I had made this choice. I wasn't giving in to sadness or regret. I was taking control of my destiny. My journey wasn't about erasing the past. It was about forging a new path, one where I wouldn't allow someone else's treachery to dictate my worth or my future. In the evenings, I would find a quiet corner of a local cafe, sip on black coffee, and scribble down my thoughts in a battered journal. My writing became both a confession and a catharsis, a raw outpouring of the pain, anger, and eventual acceptance that had taken root in my soul. I detailed every moment of betrayal, every pang of regret, and every spark of determination that grew as I embraced the freedom of solitude. Through the words, I felt an odd sense of empowerment. I was documenting not just a tale of heartbreak, but a declaration of independence, a promise to myself that I would never be made to feel less than I was. One evening, as I was leaving the cafe, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a rain-smeared window. I hardly recognized the man staring back at me, a face etched with lines of pain and eyes that had seen too much deceit. Yet, amidst that raw vulnerability, I also saw the beginnings of strength. I realized that what I had lost wasn't just a partner, it was a false self that had been defined by someone else's approval. Now, in its place, I was constructing something genuine, something that belonged solely to me. Every step I took, every decision I made, was a brick in the foundation of my new identity. Revenge, however, wasn't about becoming as bitter as the one who had wronged me. It was about rising above the situation, reclaiming my dignity, and proving that I was capable of living a life of fulfillment without the toxicity that had once suffocated me. I resolved to immerse myself fully in the journey ahead, exploring new horizons, meeting new people, and embracing experiences that would help me rediscover the parts of me that had been hidden under layers of trust and deception. I enrolled in a local photography course, learning to capture the beauty of fleeting moments with a click of my camera. The art of photography became my therapy, a means to frame the world in a way that resonated with my newfound perspective. Then, about a week into my trip, as I was wandering through an art gallery on a whim, I saw her. Standing in the corner, half hidden behind a display of modern sculptures, was the woman who had once promised me the world. Her eyes met mine, and for a brief moment, the chaos of my emotions threatened to break through my carefully constructed walls. I froze, unable to reconcile the image of the person I once loved with the stranger who now stood before me. There was no trace of remorse in her gaze, only a desperate longing that seemed to plead for redemption. I couldn't let her see the vulnerability that had once been my undoing. The ghost of our past lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken words and shattered promises. Before I could decide on my next move, she approached me with trembling steps, her voice barely above a whisper as she uttered words of apology. "I'm so sorry," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I made a mistake, and I want to fix it. Please, give me another chance." Her words, meant to thaw the ice of my heart, only fueled the flames of my indignation. I had spent days, no, weeks, rebuilding my life. And here she was, expecting that a single apology could mend the fractures of our past. I looked at her steadily, my mind racing through the labyrinth of our shared history, every betrayal as clear as the photographs I had taken during my solitary journey. "You think a simple sorry will undo everything?" I replied, my voice steady and resolute. "I trusted you, and you shattered that trust with your lies. I've built a new life out here, one that isn't defined by your mistakes." My words were not laced with the bitterness of revenge in its rawest form, but they carried the weight of a man who had risen above the betrayal. I had learned that forgiveness wasn't a currency I could exchange for peace. Instead, I had chosen to invest my energy in carving out a life that was entirely my own. For a long, excruciating minute, we stood there, the betrayed and the betrayer, locked in a silent duel of glances. I saw in her eyes a mixture of regret and desperation, the kind that only comes from knowing you've lost something irretrievable. But I wasn't interested in reclaiming the past. I was determined to guard the future I had so painstakingly rebuilt. "I don't owe you anything," I said, my tone final, echoing the resolve that had become the anthem of my journey. "There's no room for another chance here." I walked away without another word, leaving her standing amidst the art and echoes of our former life. That moment marked the final severance of a bond that had long since been poisoned by deceit. The satisfaction I felt wasn't born from a desire to hurt her, it was the pure relief of liberating myself from the chains of betrayal. I had taken a painful leap into the unknown, and in doing so, I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my new projects with a ferocity that surprised even me. I organized a local photography exhibit, showcasing the raw, unfiltered beauty of life as seen through my lens. The event was a resounding success, drawing attention from the local art community and reaffirming my belief in my own capabilities. Each compliment, every encouraging word from strangers, was a reminder that I was more than the sum of someone else's mistakes. I was a man reborn, one who had turned betrayal into a catalyst for self-discovery and growth. I remember sitting alone in my favorite seaside cafe one afternoon, a gentle smile playing on my lips as I reflected on how far I had come. The sea stretched endlessly before me, its rhythm echoing the steady beat of my own heart. I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the solitude that had forced me to confront my inner demons, to embrace the person I was meant to be without the constant need for validation from someone who had proven unworthy. I had learned that true strength wasn't about forgiving the unforgivable. It was about letting go of the desire for a reconciliation that would only perpetuate my own misery. As the trip drew to a close, I found myself at a crossroads. On one hand, there was the familiar pull of home, the world I had left behind. On the other, the promise of a future that was entirely my own, untarnished by the betrayal that had once defined me. I chose to return home, not to rejoin a broken relationship, but to face the remnants of a past that I had finally outgrown. I knew that life would continue to present challenges, but I was ready. I had faced betrayal, and in its wake, I had forged a path of resilience and self-empowerment that no one could ever take away. Returning home was both cathartic and bittersweet. I arranged to meet a few old friends, people who had seen me through the highs and lows, and as we talked, I realized that their support had never wavered. They didn't judge me for the choices I had made. Instead, they celebrated the newfound independence that now defined me. In their eyes, I was not the victim of a crumbling romance. I was a survivor, a man who had taken control of his destiny in the face of unspeakable betrayal. I even reconnected with a few estranged family members, slowly mending bridges that had been singed by the fallout of my previous engagement. Each reunion, each shared laugh was a small victory, a reminder that life was meant to be lived fully, without the shadow of past deceptions. I returned to my old job with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to excel and prove that my worth wasn't defined by the love I had lost. Every day became a deliberate act of self-respect, a defiant stand against the idea that betrayal could ever hold power over me again. The memory of her, my fiancée, the woman who had once been my beacon of hope, remained a quiet echo in the background of my new life. I didn't harbor anger for the sake of anger. I simply knew that forgiveness was not a path I was willing to tread. My revenge was not an act of malice, but a refusal to be shackled by someone else's deceit. I had taken the hardest step of all, relinquishing the hope of reconciliation, and in doing so, I had discovered that my own happiness was far more valuable than clinging to a relationship built on lies. Now, whenever I catch a glimpse of my reflection in a window or see the ocean stretching into the horizon, I am reminded of that painful yet transformative chapter of my life. I learned that sometimes the greatest revenge is not to inflict pain, but to live so fully and fiercely that the person who once hurt you becomes a distant memory, a footnote in a story that now belongs entirely to you. I learned that every betrayal, no matter how deep, could be the catalyst for a journey towards self-discovery and empowerment. I share my story not to evoke pity or to reopen old wounds, but as a reminder that we all have the power to reclaim our lives when everything seems lost. The path I chose was not easy. It was filled with moments of intense loneliness, fierce determination, and ultimately, profound growth. The scars remain, a testament to the battles I fought within myself, but they are no longer symbols of defeat. Instead, they are the badges of honor earned by a man who refused to let betrayal define his future. Looking back, I can say with absolute certainty that ghosting her, canceling the wedding, and taking that trip solo were the best decisions I ever made. I found strength in solitude, discovered a passion for art and photography, and, most importantly, I learned that my self-worth was never dependent on someone else's actions. I built a new life from the fragments of a broken past, piece by piece, until the person staring back at me in every reflection was someone I could be proud of. A man who had not only survived betrayal, but had thrived in spite of it. So if you're out there struggling with a betrayal that feels too immense to overcome, know this. The path forward may be steep and lonely, but it is yours to command. Trust in your own strength, let your pain be the fuel for your journey, and never, ever compromise your self-worth for the sake of a love that isn't real. I chose to walk away from a future built on false promises, and instead embraced a life defined by truth and resilience. And in that decision, I found a kind of freedom I never thought possible. A freedom that now carries me forward into every new day with unyielding determination. In the end, revenge was never about causing her pain. It was about reclaiming my life, refusing to be tethered by the chains of deception, and proving to myself that I was capable of rising above the hurt. Every sunrise, every captured moment behind the lens, was a reminder that I was my own person. A person strong enough to rebuild from the ashes of betrayal and to create a future that was entirely my own. I may have lost the love I thought I had, but I gained something far more valuable. The unwavering knowledge that I am enough and that my journey is defined by my choices, not by the actions of those who betray me. And so, as I continue to walk this path, I hold no illusions about the pain of the past. I recognize it, honor it, and then set it aside as a stepping stone toward a brighter, freer tomorrow. The echoes of betrayal still whisper in the recesses of my memory, but they no longer hold the power to disrupt the life I have forged. My revenge was not in seeking to harm her, but in refusing to allow her mistakes to determine my destiny. I live each day with a quiet, steadfast pride, knowing that I have turned the darkest moment of my life into a beacon of strength and self-realization. This is my story, a story of betrayal, loss, and ultimately, redemption. It is a story of a man who was once deceived, but who refused to be defined by that deception. I learned that sometimes the most profound act of revenge is simply to live well, to love oneself fiercely, and to rise above the ruins of a broken dream. And in doing so, I found that the greatest gift I could give myself was the freedom to be unapologetically, irrevocably me.